When the Chin family came to discuss the marriage proposal, I sat in the side hall observing. My maid, Shu Ning, crouched by the wall, peeking through the window slits. "Miss, don't rush," she whispered. "Let me see whether this future husband is round or flat." The matchmaker praised young Master Chin, saying he was refined and handsome. Eagerly, I asked, "Is he tall or short, dark or fair, handsome or not?" Shu Ning's smile froze on her face, looking even worse than if she had been crying. I frowned and said, "He can't be a demon, can he? Speak up." Suddenly, Shu Ning's voice resounded in my head. "Let me read Mrs. Fortune about this marriage. Good heavens, it turns out this young Master Chin is Chin Yutang, a notorious masochist. How could he possibly come to propose to my family's young lady?" I was utterly baffled. What is a masochist? Just as I heard my mother inside saying, "Young Master Chin truly is as refined and handsome as the matchmaker described." According to the agreement between my mother and me, these words were a code. They indicated that both the Chin family's manners and young Master Chen's appearance were acceptable. Just as I heaved a sigh of relief, Shu Ning's enraged, roaring voice filled my mind again. "Madam hasn't lost her mind, has she? How could she suddenly be so blind? His complexion is pale and dull, his eyes are lifeless, and his dark circles are as heavy as a ghost's. He's a man of indulgence, madam. Look carefully. His legs are shaking so much he can't stand still or sit properly. He's completely ruined himself yet dares to ask for the daughter of a third-rank official. Get lost. Get. How can I warn Miss not to marry him? If he passes on syphilis to Miss, this is no laughing matter." The words syphilis struck me like a thunderclap. I quickly walked to the window to observe young Master Chin. Sure enough, as Shu Ning described, while his appearance seemed refined at first glance, a closer look revealed fatigue, restlessness, and a demeanor that unsettled me. I beckoned to the tea-serving maid outside and instructed her to serve a pot of Dongting Biluakun to the main hall. When my mother saw the tea, she understood that I was displeased with young Master Chin. Not long after, a commotion arose in the main hall, and my mother politely but firmly sent the Chin family on their way. Once the servants had been dismissed, my mother called me over. "Tingzhu, what dissatisfied you?" I merely replied, "Young Master Chin is not an ideal match." "What does mother think?" My mother agreed, saying, "I don't find him suitable either." When the tea was served, I dialed back my enthusiasm and spoke more cautiously. The Chin mother and son noticed the shift and left with darkened expressions, as if we were the ones begging for this marriage. She added, "It's a good thing our family's daughters have ambition. But looking at the Chin mother and son, they seem fixated on you. I fear they may continue to pester us." As we were talking, Aunt Lee rushed in. "Since Madam and the eldest daughter do not favor the Chin family, why not give this match to my Tinglian instead?" Before she could finish, my mother cut her off. "We've only just finished meeting them. How do you know whether we favor them or not?" Aunt Lee smirked and said, "Madam." Chin left with a scowl on her face. My mother frowned. "What is the urgency? Do you have something important to say?" Aunt Lee chuckled nervously. "If Madam and the young lady think the Chin family is beneath them, why not let my Tinglian marry him? After all, Chin young master is a fine gentleman no matter how you look at him. Yes, Tinglian is of concubine birth, but does that mean she doesn't deserve to take a match rejected by the legitimate daughter?" My mother, now angry, scolded, "You fool. Tinglian is also a cherished young lady of the Luo family. Do you think as the matriarch, I wouldn't want the best for her?" I joined in. "You can never fully know a person's character. It's better to be cautious." After much persuasion, we finally managed to send Aunt Lee away. I returned to my small courtyard and stared at Shu Ning, who had her mouth stuffed with pastries. Shu Ning grinned obsequiously. "Miss, I tasted them for you. These pastries are quite good." Clearly, I know she sneaks pastries every day. Have I not grown used to it? Why is she so unnerved by my gaze today? I directed Shu Ning to do some chores. After a long time of observation, I finally confirmed that I could hear Shu Ning's inner voice. Shu Ning grew up with me, and we're as close as sisters. But for the first time, I realized that this seemingly composed girl dares to say anything in her mind. She even knows many hidden secrets. Collapsing onto the ground and gasping for breath, Shu Ning looked at me with a resentful gaze. Feeling a twinge of guilt, I let her rest on the divan and casually picked up a book from my desk to read. Then I heard Shu Ning's inner voice shriek. "Why is Miss still looking at that Chin fellow's portrait? Don't tell me she's actually fallen for him." Only then did I notice the portrait of young Master Chin, tucked inside the poetry collection. I had carelessly placed it there the other day. When I casually flipped open the book, it just happened to land on the page with the portrait. Instinctively, I wanted to close the book but felt it would seem too abrupt, so I froze awkwardly in place, deepening Xu Ning's misunderstanding. He looks so filial, but that's because he's a complete mama's boy. He's 21 years old and still needs to snuggle in his mother's arms to fall asleep at night. His mother even gets jealous of the maids around him. One maid was beaten to death right in front of him, and he didn't dare say a word. Don't think he's decent just because he doesn't have a concubine. Outside, he has countless lovers, all resembling his mother. He spends his days devoted to his mother at home and then begs for affection from mothers outside. He even plays with candles and ropes in private. My pure, kind-hearted miss, oh heavens, someone give me a chance, and I swear I'll help Miss see through this scumbag. She seemed utterly desperate. Slowly, I closed the poetry book, thinking, if you want a chance, I'll give it to you. Xu Ning, go check if there are any new powders or accessories in the shops. Buy 2 sets, send one to second miss as usual, and you can split the remaining silver as your reward. Xu Ning leapt off the divan, grabbed 2 junior maids, and dashed out the door. I summoned 2 skilled servants and issued my instructions. They looked surprised but didn't ask any questions, quickly carrying out their orders. Xu Ning didn't return until nightfall. The 2 junior maids looked hesitant, while Xu Ning wore a conflicted expression. Miss, this servant has something to say but doesn't know if it's appropriate. She thought I didn't notice the gleam in her eyes. Calmly practicing my calligraphy, I replied, if you're unsure whether to say it, then you shouldn't. Xu Ning was stunned, and her inner voice squawked like a rooster. Miss, why are you suddenly into philosophy? Aren't you curious to ask what I want to say? Why is my stupid mouth teasing like this? I brought 2 witnesses, wandered around alleys for half a day, walked until my legs grew thicker, and finally caught that Chen fellow leaving the house. I've completed my task, so I can't let this effort go to waste. Smiling, I said, if you really want to say it, go ahead. What is this, miss? You're ruining all my gossiping fun. Boo-hoo-hoo. But since you smiled so beautifully, I'll begrudgingly forgive you. Wearing a pained expression, Xu Ning said. This afternoon, while taking the 2 maids to pick out powders, I witnessed an unspeakable spectacle. What kind of spectacle? I asked. A woman was walking a large dog, but as we got closer, we realized it wasn't a dog, it was a man. Truly, it was outrageous. The 2 maids chimed in. It's true, miss. And the man's figure looked familiar, so we couldn't help but follow quietly. And then, we discovered. The way they played off each other, I couldn't help but ask. Discovered what? Lowering her voice, Xu Ning replied. That man pretending to be a dog looked exactly like young Master Qin. The woman whipped him, and he barked happily like a dog, even licking the tip of her shoe. I gasped audibly. The 2 junior maids took their hush money and left. Xu Ning continued. Miss, young Master Qin came to propose in the morning and went to be someone's dog by evening. Clearly, he's insincere. I remained silent. How am I supposed to explain to Mother and Aunt Lee that I've discovered young Master Chen's bizarre proclivity for being treated like a dog? This information cannot spread from my lips. After a long silence, Xu Ning, misunderstanding my hesitation, donned an expression of noble sacrifice and said to me with great determination. If you still love that Chen fellow, I can endure it. I'll marry him for you and even wash his dirty laundry. I shot her a glare. Is this truly what she thinks of me, that I'm such a fool? Xu Ning quickly lowered her head and said meekly. Miss, what's wrong? Are you upset that I exposed his true nature? This masochist has to be cursed. One look, and now even my sweet, innocent miss has been poisoned by him. Oh heavens, I'm about to faint. I'm about to faint too, I thought, but said firmly. I understand your concern. Don't mention this to anyone else. I have a plan. A few days later, the 2 servants returned with their report. On the surface, young Master Chen's reputation was still intact, suggesting his activities took place in more clandestine venues than the usual brothels. I instructed them to disguise themselves and investigate the hidden haunts of debauchery. Sure enough, they uncovered the truth. In the capital, Many men shared Chen's penchant for groveling before courtesans, but Chen had gained particular notoriety for his depravity. He was already infamous for being utterly degraded. The servants also discovered that Chen frequently visited discreet medical clinics, where he procured medicines for virility. He harbored constant suspicion that he had contracted syphilis and had even sought treatments for the disease. Thinking back to the day he arrived, impeccably dressed, to propose marriage, I couldn't suppress a shudder. Even a married friend of mine, Xiao Yomiai, had subtly warned me that Madame Chen herself was no saint. I said to Xu Ning, "Invite my brother to come by." A few days later, on my brother's day off, he agreed to bring some late-night snacks from Yueli Tavern. When he stepped off the carriage that evening, his expression was grim. Inside the carriage sat his classmate, surnamed Min, who also worked under the magistrate. At that moment, I knew something significant had happened. At the hour of 9 to 11 p.m., the entire family gathered in father's study. Aunt Li muttered, "It's so late, what's the matter now?" Father, wearing a cold expression, declared, "Our Luo family will have no further dealings with the Qin family." Aunt Li asked, "What happened?" Brother explained, "Tonight, at Yueli Tavern, I encountered that Qin boy carousing with his lecherous friends in a private room. His personal life is none of my business, but I clearly overheard him and his companions mocking the women of our family. He claimed the daughters of the Luo family are promiscuous and said someone had even given him an intimate keepsake to beg for a secret engagement. At that point, I decided to throw him and his gang in jail. I had them arrested on charges of soliciting illegal prostitutes and causing public disorder." Aunt Li, who had previously muttered that all men were prone to lust, fell silent upon hearing this. Mother said gravely, "How absurd! How dare he spread such slander?" Brother reassured her. "Mother, don't worry, they've already been taken into custody. That group of spoiled brats won't dare cause trouble after a bit of a scare." Mother nodded. Fortunately, neither Tingzhu nor Tinglian ever met him in private. What keepsake could they possibly have given him? It's pure fabrication. Father added, "He wouldn't dare fabricate such a claim out of thin air. There must be something he's twisting to his advantage." The room fell into a heavy silence as everyone pondered the situation, until the sound of Aunt Li collapsing into a wooden chair broke it, startling everyone. "What are you doing, causing such a scene?" Mother scolded. Aunt Li, trembling all over, stammered, What if it's true?" "What do you mean?" Mother asked instinctively, her expression darkening. "What did you do? Didn't I already tell you to abandon those foolish ideas?" Aunt Li clutched the armrest for support and said hesitantly, "It's nothing terrible. I didn't do anything wrong. I just gave young Master Qin a little something." Somehow, she found the audacity to grow louder, as if convincing herself. Men who don't visit brothels aren't normal. What man doesn't drink or indulge in pleasure? When they've had too much to drink, it's only natural to say foolish things. Chen's family has some wealth, and Chen himself has a decent reputation. If Tinglian marries him and endures a little, she'll be fine in the long run. This is utterly ridiculous. I almost couldn't stop myself from retorting, disregarding her status as an elder. But brother slammed the table, shouting, "Is our Luo family's fortune not enough? What is the Qin family compared to ours? And what kind of man is that boy, worthy of making my sister endure suffering? Do you know what I saw tonight? He was being trampled on by a prostitute, enjoying every moment of it." Mother grabbed Aunt Li by the collar and demanded, "What intimate item did you give him?" I turned around to find Tinglian, who clutched my sleeve in fear, her voice trembling. "Sister, a few days ago Aunt asked me for a handkerchief, one with my maiden name embroidered on it. I never thought she would do something like this." Realizing it was only a handkerchief, my heart settled. I held her hand tightly and reassured her. "It's just a handkerchief. There's nothing shameful about it, and it's not a big deal." Leaning against my side, Tinglian finally relaxed a little. Meanwhile, Father sternly said to Aunt Li, "Return to your quarters and reflect on your actions. Your carelessness in everyday matters is one thing, but to be so reckless in a serious affair, filled with selfish schemes, is intolerable. From now on, you are not to have any say in Tinglian's upbringing." Aunt Li shrieked. "Tinglian is my daughter. For 14 years, I've fought for her in everything. How dare you take her away from me and give her to Madam?" Mother let out a long sigh, about to say something when Tinglian spoke, her voice firm and deliberate. "I would rather not be your daughter." Aunt Li leaped up to strike her, but brother, quick as lightning, stepped between them. The sound of a slap echoed in the room as a bright red mark appeared on Brother's face. Tinglian, already in tears, cried, "Brother," before covering her face and running away. I tried to chase after her, but her maid stopped me at the door. With a wry smile, she said, "Young miss, let second miss cry it out. Once she knows where the problem lies, it'll be easier to sort everything out." It turned out that since Mother had begun arranging a marriage for me, Aunt Lee, in her desperation, had secretly sought a match for Tinglian. She even spent a fortune hiring a so-called spiritual matchmaker. Madame Chen had also visited this matchmaker but didn't mention her son's peculiarities. Instead, she learned that the Luo family was eager to arrange a marriage. Aunt Lee, being 70% satisfied with young Master Qin, eagerly pushed for the match when the Qin family came to negotiate with Mother. After Mother politely declined, Emily felt as if she'd lost a treasure and became desperate. That desperation led her to recklessly send the handkerchief. Thankfully, it was only a handkerchief, and it would soon be returned to the Luo family. No one else would know it had ever been in the hands of an unrelated man. Fearing that Tinglian might do something drastic, Mother arranged for her to move into her courtyard. After her outburst of tears, Tinglian seemed much less burdened, a small silver lining amidst the chaos. I saw her pacing outside my courtyard and waved her over. Tinglian gave me a bitter smile and said, "Even if Aunt did something terrible, she only meant well for me. I've told her countless times I don't need her interference, but I still dragged you into this mess. It's my fault." Xu Ning poked her head in, saw us huddled close whispering, and quietly backed out to guard the door. The next moment, I heard Xu Ning's inner voice echoing in my mind. "Poor second miss, forced into a marriage with some old prince as a stepmother. That can't be a good life. The old prince already has children, and once she marries in, she'll instantly be a grandmother. The prince even threatens his son that he'll have another heir with the new wife if he doesn't behave. Meanwhile, the stubborn son mocks his stepmother for marrying an old man for status, saying she's not even worth one finger of his real mother. After father and son fight, they still make up as family, but the poor stepmother is left stuck in the middle. Aunt Lee only cares about using her to elevate her own status, dreaming of becoming a wealthy lady and using second miss to challenge Madam. She won't even let second miss return to her natal home to vent her frustrations, forcing her to endure until she becomes depressed. Heaven help her, no wonder she'd end up taking her own life. At that moment, I finally understood Xu Ning's feelings when she saw me looking at young Master Chen's portrait. I interrupted Tinglian and said seriously, "She may have done it for you, but her intentions weren't entirely pure. In the past, she humiliated you in public, and now she's rushing to marry you off without regard for your feelings. Is this truly for your sake, or is she using you to boost her own standing?" Softening my tone, I added, "We're sisters. We don't speak as if we're from different families. You've always been soft-hearted, but life is long, and it's not just about marriage. For every decision you make, you need to take the reins yourself." Knowing how sensitive she is, I rarely spoke to her so bluntly. Tinglian, holding back tears, asked, "Did this incident cause any trouble for you? Will it affect your own marriage prospects?" "Don't worry," I reassured her. "Everything is fine." From a scholarly family, the Lin family matriarch had sent a formal visiting card. Lin was renowned as a prodigy from a young age, chosen by the royal court to serve as Prince Duan's companion. Having learned from this recent debacle, Brother had his colleague discreetly investigate Lin Bi's private life. It turned out that he was known for his uprightness, practically indifferent to women. Mother, being extremely cautious, agreed to meet with Madame Lin and arranged a coincidental encounter between me and Lin at Baihua Garden. When we arrived, I indeed had a chance encounter with him. Lin instinctively stepped back 2 paces, cupped his hands in greeting, and said, "I didn't realize there were young ladies here. If I've offended, please forgive me." I smiled and replied, "You're too polite." It was a brief meeting, not enough to develop any strong feelings, but his demeanor was clean and proper, a rare and admirable quality. Looking back, I saw Xu Ning staring blankly at Lin's departing figure. "So that's Lin Yi," she muttered. "He really is handsome." When nothing more followed, I suddenly remembered that Xu Ning didn't know this was a planned matchmaking event. After returning home, I cleared my throat and said, "Xu Ning, what do you think of Lin?" Xu Ning replied, "Handsome and courteous." "Exactly," I said. "That's what I thought too." But her response was too composed, there wasn't a single inner voice accompanying her words. So I hinted. Today's encounter was a matchmaking event. What do you think, if I were to marry him? 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. A full moment passed before Xu Ning forced a stiff smile and said, "Miss, you're joking, right?" I pressed her. "I'm not joking. If you think he's suitable, you'll have to start calling him young master." Xu Ning blurted out. "Unsuitable?" I asked. "Why not? Handsome, courteous, from a matching family background. What's wrong?" Xu Ning fell silent for a long time, took a deep breath, and finally said, "Miss, all I can say is that those who understand, understand. Those who don't, won't. There's no point in me explaining what you won't understand anyway. So don't ask me why, I just know." "Stop," I said, grabbing her ear before she could ramble further. Xu Ning awkwardly closed her mouth, and I asked, "Is it really so hard to say whether he's suitable or not?" Xu Ning began again. "Those who understand." I covered her mouth. I focused intently, listening to her inner voice. Heavens! Who on earth made this matchmaking list for Miss? Drag them out, give them 1,000 lashes, beat them to death, exile them to Ningguta, and throw them into the 18th level of hell, never to reincarnate. If their eyes are useless, I'll gouge them out and wash them for them. If nothing else works, I'll chop them up like chives and eat them. Why do they keep finding men who, at first glance, seem perfect for marriage but upon closer inspection, are completely unmarriageable? I said calmly, "Brother has already investigated. Lin has a good reputation." Xu Ning's thoughts paused briefly, then she laughed nervously. "Oh no." I cursed the eldest young master. "Guess I hit a steel plate this time. Good thing Miss doesn't know what I'm thinking. Otherwise, I'd be banished to the cold palace." I silently watched her. In my mind, Xu Ning held countless immunity tokens. I let go of her, sighed softly, and thought, these thoughts of mine, Tinglian and the other young sisters wouldn't understand. Even Yomiai is in fragile health. I can't trouble her with my concerns. Xu Ning said, "A fair lady is a gentleman's desire. Miss, you have no reason to worry about finding a suitable husband. It's been a long day. Please rest early." "Ugh, let me think of the right words and gather my courage to tell Miss the truth tomorrow," her inner voice muttered. Feeling reassured, I went to sleep peacefully. The next morning, Xu Ning was nowhere to be found. Her maid explained, Xu Ning's mother fell gravely ill last night, so she returned home immediately. I asked anxiously, did she take a physician with her? "Don't worry, Miss B. Madam sent the family physician to accompany her. Take a trip to the eastern part of the city and invite Dr. Zhou, who specializes in lung ailments. Bring some extra silver for Xu Ning and her family." "Understood, Mrs." Years ago, during a bandit raid, Xu Ning had risked her life to protect me. Later, Mother freed her family from bondage and gifted them generous rewards. Yet Xu Ning chose to stay by my side, no longer a servant but a half-mistress of my courtyard, and my dearest sister. By the next day, news arrived that her mother's condition was her chronic ailment. While her life wasn't in danger, her spirits remained low. Xu Ning stayed to care for her mother for a few days, and I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, what could possibly be wrong with Lin? Could Lin Madam have hidden something from us? But she didn't seem like a deceitful person. I summoned a servant to investigate further. After 3 days, the results were clear. Lin's conduct was impeccable. Xu Ning returned, but when I questioned her, she still refused to answer. All I heard in her heart was, "Miss, don't blame me. I really did work up the courage to tell you." But the words got stuck again and, well, wilted away. Damn it. I stared at her helplessly. A young maid came in to announce, "There's a page boy at the back door. He says Lin has urgent business to discuss with you." I was perplexed. Lin Madam had seemed satisfied with me, but Lin E himself had been lukewarm during our meeting. Why would he take such bold steps today, even bypassing the formalities? The page boy, lowering his gaze respectfully, said in a firm tone, "Miss Luo, rest assured, I will safely escort you there and back without any disturbances." His attire and demeanor weren't something a common criminal could fake. As I hesitated, I noticed Xu Ning looking relieved, her heart full of light thoughts. What urgent matter could Lin Eve possibly have? Oh, I know. He's going to confess his feelings to Miss B. Wonderful. This kind of thing is best handled directly between the parties. Miss, don't fall for someone who can't give you results. Convinced, I agreed and boarded the carriage with Xu Ning. However, the carriage did not head toward the Lin residence. The page boy explained, "The capital is full of prying eyes. Our master has a quiet private residence on the outskirts, more suitable for discussing important matters." The curtains were tightly drawn, and by the time we alighted, I realized we had arrived in the suburbs. Before me stood a refined estate, far beyond what someone as young as Lin Yi could plausibly own. The page boy led us to a small courtyard and gestured for me to enter alone. In the distance, I heard faint voices, one belonging to Lin Yi, the other vaguely familiar, though I couldn't immediately place it. As I approached, their conversation became clearer. "So, Lin Yi, you're serious about proposing to Luo Tingzhu. You want to follow the traditional 3 letters and 6 rites, marry her, and exchange vows with her. You like her. How much do you like her? What nonsense are you spouting? Just one chance meeting at Baihua Garden, and you're spinning such a story about Tingzhu. Tingzhu, I've only met her once. And yet, after over a decade of knowing you, you always call me so distantly." A loud crash echoed from inside the room. When I reached the doorway, I saw 2 men embracing, or more accurately, Lin Yi was being held and kissed by another man. Lin Yi forcefully pushed the man away, knocking over 2 jade carvings from the display cabinet, which shattered on the ground. He then wiped his mouth harshly with the back of his hand. "There is a hierarchy between ruler and subject," Lin Yi said coldly. "Your Highness will always be your Highness." At that moment, I recognized the other man. It was Prince Duan. I had some connections to the imperial family in my childhood and had met both Lin Yi and Prince Duan before, though we were not close. Spoiled by the Empress Dowager, Prince Duan had grown arrogant and idle, barely interested in his studies. Lin Yi, a talented scholar, had been assigned to accompany him as his tutor, a position far beneath his abilities. Prince Duan had once risked his life to shield the emperor from a poisoned bowl of soup, nearly losing his life. As a result, even the emperor was reluctant to discipline him. Prince Duan met my gaze without any embarrassment and, ignoring Lin Yi's anger, said calmly, "You're always harping on about hierarchy and duty. But as the saying goes, if a ruler orders his subject to die, the subject must obey. So, if I want to kiss you, why didn't you let me?" Lin Yi looked like he was struggling to find the logic in this argument before retorting, "That's absurd. It's not the same." Prince Duan raised an eyebrow. "And how is it different? Do you want to die? If you die, I'll make Luo Tingzhu your burial companion." "Madman," Lin Yi cursed. "You've completely lost it, Your Highness. You're insane." Lin Yi spun around to leave, only to come face to face with me. His face instantly turned pale. "Miss Luo, what are you doing here?" Prince Duan watched the scene with amusement, as if expecting me to lose my temper, storm off, or make a scene with Lin Yi. Instead, I smiled gracefully and said, "Thank you, Your Highness, for inviting me to such a fine spectacle." Lin Yi said hastily, "I can explain." But he didn't need to. I had heard enough to piece together the situation. I replied, "When your page boy invited me, he said you had an urgent matter to discuss. So, let's discuss it." Lin Yi turned to Prince Duan and said coldly, "Since this was Your Highness's arrangement, may we borrow your study for the conversation?" Lin Yi and I walked away calmly, side by side, leaving Prince Duan with a dark expression, his smug smile finally wiped off his face. Xu Ning, having finally broken past the page boy's blockade, rushed over like a mother hen shielding her chick, placing herself between me and Prince Duan's line of sight. For the first time in a while, I heard her screaming in her voice, "Thank goodness, my heart can finally settle." Although I'd long suspected that Lin Yi would never marry and was likely in a close relationship with Prince Duan, seeing it with my own eyes is still shocking. Damn it, if you two want to kiss, just kiss. Why call your supposed marriage prospect to watch? What, did you think the kiss was too lonely and needed someone to stand between you? Or perhaps someone to help you align your faces properly? Prince Duan, you madman, I almost want to ship you two as a couple. But why drag my miss into your mess of cat and mouse? What did she ever do to deserve this? And what about the poor jade carvings? What did they ever do to you? Once inside the study, Lin Yi glanced at Xu Ning, who had the gleam of gossip in her eyes. "She's my confidante," I said. "No need to avoid her." "Oh no, Miss values me this highly. I always thought I was just her lackey," Xu Ning thought, nearly tearing up. I patted her head affectionately and motioned for her to sit with me. Lin Yi, looking like a criminal on trial, stood before us. There's no need for that, Lin, I said. I know you had no intention of involving me in this. Lin Yi confessed, Prince Duan and I have had a complicated relationship for years. Because of it, I've declined several matches my mother proposed, and rumors about my disinterest in women have spread. In the past, I used my studies as an excuse. Now that I've grown older and my career is flourishing, others are watching me closely, and my mother has been pushing harder. She arranged the Baihua garden meeting without telling me. It wasn't until she repeatedly asked me about any serendipitous encounters that I realized something was amiss. I said, Prince Duan's misunderstanding might be partly my fault. Out of curiosity about your character, I had someone inquire into your private affairs. That was an intrusion on my part, and it seems to have upset the prince as well. Lin Yi replied, It's no matter. As for this match, I interrupted with a smile. You and I are simply incompatible. Everything is fine, just not suitable. Lin Yi arranged for his page boy to escort us back home and sincerely said, I hope Miss Luo will keep this to herself. I will personally visit to apologize and ensure no fault is placed on you. Watching how effortlessly Lin Yi commanded Prince Duan's page boy, who treated him with the same respect as Prince Duan, I couldn't help but ask, Lin, how much longer do you think you can avoid this? Lin Yi replied, Miss Luo, rest assured, I would never deceive a woman into marrying me. I clarified, I meant, you don't seem indifferent to Prince Duan. Lin Yi gave a bitter smile. That's Prince Duan, the Empress Dowager's and the Emperor's treasure. To say any more would be disrespectful. On the day Lin Yi and his mother visited our home to formally apologize, I noticed Prince Duan's carriage parked outside. Holding the basin meant for Yomiai's blessings, I encountered Prince Duan's page boy, who asked, My master wishes to know, today's discussion isn't about marriage, is it? I laughed, exasperated. Please tell your master this. Asking 1,000 times whether Lin Yi is courting someone is pointless. It would be far more effective if he asked the Empress Dowager to arrange a marriage for him and Lin Yi instead. Without waiting for the page boy's reply, I turned and walked into the house. The Empress had been looking for a bride for Prince Duan for quite some time now, and Prince Duan surely understood the implications. By the time Lin Yi and Lady Lin departed, the prince's carriage had already left. Xu Ning was still cursing silently. Prince Duan has really gone mad, causing trouble right at someone else's doorstep. Hearing her thoughts, I couldn't help but laugh, the tension in my chest finally easing. Xu Ning stayed by my side as we worked on sewing, making a small belly band for Yomei's unborn child. I thought of Yomei's marriage into the Yang family and sighed with emotion. For a daughter of a prominent family, no matter the challenges, she had to bear them. A household full of concubines. That just meant sharing the burden of childbirth. Intrigue and scheming. An opportunity to display wit and intelligence. If she could endure the difficulties of bearing this first child, life would gradually ease afterward. Yumei had once envied me, saying, At least you aren't constantly controlled. But now, I too felt lost. I couldn't marry this one, and I couldn't marry that one. So whom was I to marry? Xu Ning noticed my sigh and asked what troubled me. I couldn't articulate it clearly and finally replied vaguely. I'm thinking about what kind of man I want to marry. Xu Ning teased me. Lady has suddenly become eager to marry, has she? Then her inner voice screamed, Heaven help us. 2 marriage prospects, one's a masochist, the other a man-lover. No wonder Lady is traumatized into silence. Out loud, she said. Let me think of all the decent men left in the capital, Shang San from the south of the city, Li Si from the east, Lu Wu from the west. Or how about those Poetry Society scholars praised by Chen and Jusher? I'll line them all up for you. True to her word, Xu Ning rattled off a long list and took me around to observe them. Some were attractive on the outside but rotten within, while others were upright and genuinely talented. Lady, do you see anyone you like? Xu Ning asked, clearly ready to tie someone up in a sack and present him to me. I couldn't help but laugh. To be honest, you'll say I'm being picky, but I don't like any of them. And that's perfectly normal, Xu Ning said with certainty, her unwavering trust and admiration shining through. It was the same as that day long ago, when I could no longer run and told her to leave me behind. Xu Ning had carried me on her back, her feet blistered and bloody, yet she refused to stop until we carved a path out. Luo Tingzhu, you can't die here, she'd said. Pausing my calligraphy, I asked. Don't you think my standards are too high? Xu Ning smiled, dimples appearing. But you're Luo Tingzhu, the girl who amazed the capital with a poem at the age of 8. Just then, one of Mother's maids arrived in a rush, reporting that the Empress had summoned Mother to the palace and requested I accompany her. The Empress greeted me warmly. Tingzhu has grown so much, she said as I bowed respectfully. Before my uncle left for his fiefdom, he had been close to the Empress. When Mother gave birth to me and fell ill, Father was busy with official duties, so my aunt had taken me in and cared for me until I turned 6. After my aunt's departure, the Empress had not yet ascended the throne, and my family, as loyal subjects, kept their distance to avoid suspicion. This was our first intimate meeting in years, and the Empress remained as kind as ever. Mother cautiously inquired about the purpose of the summons. The Empress replied directly. Prince Duan told the Empress Dowager that he wishes to spend his life with his companion and study partner. The Empress Dowager had confined Prince Duan as punishment, and Mother gasped audibly. 2 days ago, the Empress Dowager summoned Lady Lin to the palace for questioning. She swore there was no such thing, saying Lin Yi had been courting marriage alliances and had no improper entanglements. Lin Yi later entered the palace, urgently using Prince Duan's token that grants unrestricted entry, begging the Empress Dowager not to implicate his family. The Empress sighed. The Empress Dowager hadn't even done much yet, and Prince Duan already threw a fit, so much so that the Empress Dowager now has 2 cold sores on her lip. I can't interfere in their affairs, so I summoned those involved to the palace for a chat under the guise of old acquaintances. There's no need to worry. Treat it as a social visit. The Empress turned to me and said kindly. Tingzhu, while I chat with your mother, go along with Nanny and enjoy yourself elsewhere. I obeyed and had only walked a short distance before I encountered Prince Kong. Feigning surprise, he greeted me familiarly. Lady Luo. Or should I say, Luo Mimi. I bowed respectfully. Prince Kong smiled. Have we become so distant? Come, let's take a walk together. Sure enough, as we walked, the conversation naturally turned to Prince Duan and Lin Yi, and then to the topic of my marriage. Seeing you today, I realize how graceful and elegant you've become. I hear you've begun considering marriage, he said. I replied. Your Highness has matured as well. I hear your principal consort recently gave birth to a son, and now even your secondary consort is expecting. Such joy for you and your household. Luo Mimi is beautiful and talented. Suitors must be lining up endlessly, he said smoothly. I wonder whose household will win such a treasure. A sense of foreboding filled me, and I smiled politely while taking a step back. Your Highness, I must return to accompany my mother back home. If there is nothing pressing, I beg your leave. Prince Kong seemed as though he had more to say, but Xu Ning swiftly interjected. Lady, let's not keep the Empress waiting. With Xu Ning pulling me away, we quickly left. On the way back to the estate, Xu Ning asked. Miss, have you decided not to marry Prince Kong? I nodded. I've made up my mind. I won't marry him. He doesn't possess the qualities of a virtuous ruler. He admires my talent, but he doesn't care for my abilities. I cannot share a bed and dream different dreams. It was in that moment that all my recent worries seemed to dissipate. I finally understood. I wasn't desperate to marry. I was worried about the kind of life I wanted to lead. I decided to return to Jiangnan. When I told Mother, she was sitting in the bamboo grove reading. This grove had been transplanted by Father for her. The recent snowstorms had been severe, and with father preoccupied with official duties, he hadn't returned home for days. The seat beside her remained empty. Mother said, "I'll send word for your brothers to escort you." My maternal grandparents' family in Jiangnan was a prominent and respected one. My grandfather had considerable influence and raised Mother, his youngest daughter, with great care. When she came of age, suitors from all over vied for her hand. "I might stay for a few years," I said. Mother replied, "You can stay as long as you like at your maternal family's home. After you got married, you rarely returned. Your father and I miss you dearly. It would be good for you to spend more time with them on my behalf. There's no rush to marry. Your father and I secretly wish to keep you with us for a few more years. Prince Kong isn't an ideal match anyway. If you leave, perhaps it will discourage him." Leaning against her knee, I asked, "And if I never marry?" Mother's expression softened, and she laughed. "That would suit your grandfather perfectly. He would love you even more than he loves me, I'm sure. Honestly, I'm more worried your father might not let you leave Jiangnan at all." Mother had married young and far away, a lifelong regret for her family. As she spoke, she reached out to smooth my hair. Her hands were red and chapped from the cold, still carrying the faint aroma of the porridge she had shared with the estate's guards during their outing to the outskirts. The warmth and simplicity of the moment gave me a deep sense of reassurance. I teased her gently. "Grandfather dotes on me because he loves you. There's no more or less to it." On the day of my departure, the entire family escorted me to the canal dock. Tinglian had already cried twice, her eyes red and swollen. I slipped a note into her palm, a list of eligible young gentlemen that Xu Ning and I had carefully observed. At the same time, a page boy arrived with a letter, gesturing toward a carriage parked at a distance from Prince Duan's estate. "This is a farewell gift from my master," he said. "He thought it might be useful for Miss Luo when she arrives in Jiangnan." I looked over to see Lin Yi peeking out from behind the carriage curtain, giving me a small smile before the fabric fell back into place. Lin Yi's ancestral roots were in Jiangnan, and he had some connections there. I accepted the gift and boarded the boat with Xu Ning and my uncle. The river journey was rough. I didn't get seasick, but Xu Ning was completely incapacitated, lying stiffly on the bed with her eyes unfocused. Seeing her in such a state made my heart ache. I brought a bowl of medicine and fed it to her. "Miss is so good to me." "Boo-hoo, why? Even a madman like Prince Duan has someone, and yet Miss still can't find the right match." "Enough. Any more of this, and it'll be impolite," her inner voice muttered as I forcibly poured the medicine into her mouth to shut her up. I stayed in Jiangnan for 3 years. With my maternal grandfather's reputation and Lin Yi's letter of introduction, I met many scholars and literary figures. Together with my cousins, I started hosting poetry gatherings, which began as small family events but grew into something much larger. Now, they're well known across Jiangnan. At the same time, more and more suitors sought my hand. I still didn't want to marry, which pleased my grandfather. Yet occasionally, he would convey messages from familiar families, asking if I was open to certain matches. "This Su Jia," grandfather began, "I've seen him before. Looks decent, has some literary talent, and is a year older than you. His father came personally to ask me about him, so I brought it up with you." I smiled and said, "You've spoken so much about him this time. It seems you're quite pleased with him." "Jiangnan has always been home to many scholars," grandfather replied, "but even more so, it's home to frivolous talents. This one is honest and reliable, and they say he admires you greatly. On further thought, he seems acceptable." Grandfather let out a cold snort before adding, "Still, I'm reluctant to see you marry. Your father has treated my daughter well, yet she still suffered some grievances. Though I have my complaints about him, I also know it would be hard to find anyone better." When grandfather was young, he was the most renowned and romantic scholar in Jiangnan. Yet years later, he came to despise such men. Looking at his graying hair and stooped figure, I felt a rush of emotion and said, "Many admire me, but if they're rare and not easily found, there's no need to search far and wide." Grandfather nodded and said, "Very well, I'll tell the Su family that everything depends on fate." He then asked, "Are there going to be any men at this month's poetry gathering? Should I paint something for it in advance?" I prepared the ink for him, honored. Our poetry gatherings, since their inception, had only admitted women. Meanwhile, other poetry societies flourished outside, inevitably drawing comparisons. Over time, some detractors began to provoke us, accusing our gatherings of being small-minded and incapable of competing with others. Grandfather dismissed their comments, saying, "Let them be." When I was young, even sneezing would make the tabloids, claiming I had disgraced the literary world by spraying snot on someone's family plaque. What nonsense! After some discussion, we decided to allow only the champions of other poetry societies to attend. This would limit numbers and maintain quality, ensuring that our gatherings wouldn't be tarnished. Naturally, this brought more criticism. Some accused us of being overly selective and called for these champions to boycott us, refusing to feed our arrogance. We didn't care. After all, it wasn't us who invited them. Even those willing to come had to undergo our scrutiny for both talent and character before being admitted. On the day of the gathering, we convened at a countryside estate. A light rain fell, and I sat with a few familiar friends in a quiet pavilion. Some of us composed poems in earnest, while others chatted leisurely. One woman was writing furiously, her brush flying across the page. "My lady," my cousin teased, "why exhaust yourself so much? Let your maid do the copying for you. Your maid's writing is excellent, unlike Xu Ning's, who serves Tingzhu." Laughter erupted all around. I wanted to defend Xu Ning, but the moment I opened my mouth, I burst into laughter myself. "They're all literary stars with their names in historical records," Xu Ning thought bitterly. "How can I argue with them? I'm the only one without a name, and I still have to copy everything by hand. How am I supposed to survive?" Madame Yi finally stopped laughing and said, "I have boundless inspiration. All of your poems are wonderful, and since my handwriting is excellent, it saves everyone the trouble of copying. It's a perfect arrangement." Setting her brush down, she rubbed her wrist. I smiled and said, "My handwriting isn't bad either. Why don't I help you copy for a while?" As I helped her, she rested her chin in her hand and asked, "You're not married or engaged yet. Shall I keep an eye out for you?" Madame Yi came from a distinguished family and was of high seniority. I knew her intentions were kind and replied, "Thank you for your kindness, madam, but I believe in fate. I'm afraid it won't be easy to marry me off." "Among the younger generation in my family," she said, "there are many loving couples, all paired by me. No matter how high your standards are, I'd like to try. Tell me, what are your requirements?" Truly a remarkable woman, I thought, laughing. "They're not many, just two. First," I began, "I must like him. Second, he must love me. With your family background and talents, young men who meet those criteria could line up from your grandfather's house in Jiangnan all the way to your father's home in the capital," she teased. "Surely your requirements aren't just those two." After some thought, I added, "He must admire me, not for my noble lineage, my celebrated talent, or my beauty. I want him to love me for every unremarkable yet heartfelt poem I've written, and for my bare face when I straighten his collar each morning." Madame Yi pondered for a moment before speaking. "My husband and I supported each other for 20 years. We were considered a loving couple. But after hearing you talk, I think husbands are better off dead." The room erupted in laughter again. Madame Yi sorted through her manuscripts and stamped them with a seal, leaving a record of the poems she had transcribed for everyone. I got to leave my own editor's mark on the collection, basking in a bit of shared glory. The seal Madame Yi used was newly carved, one I had never seen before. Seeing our curiosity, she smiled and explained, "My late husband has been gone for 10 years now. My eldest daughter-in-law has taken charge of the household, so I finally built myself a retreat in the mountains. Free at last. I spend my days reading, carving seals, and enjoying life. This is my new one." My cousin took a closer look and praised, "The name is perfect." Then she turned to Xu Ning, teasing, "Do you even recognize these characters?" Xu Ning looked defeated. "I don't." "Why don't you let Tingzhu tell me?" Everyone laughed again. I glanced at the seal and froze. Xu Ning burst out laughing. "What's this, miss? Even you don't know the characters?" My cousin chimed in. "For simple characters, how could you not recognize them?" "All right then, what are they?" I asked, playing along. "Chun and Jusher." Xu Ning froze too, finally catching on. Oh no, this is a big one. A true heavyweight. Not someone unknown, just someone who didn't have time to change their name. Am I the only illiterate one here? I smiled and said, the name is perfect indeed. I sat beside Chunanjusher, flipping through the poems she had copied. Many weren't written by the women at our gatherings but had been collected from streets, alleys, and even brothels, where she had ventured in disguise as a man. Such meticulous effort is truly admirable, I praised. She laughed. I'm just glad you don't find it crude. Turning to the first page, she said. Here it is, the little poem you wrote at 8 years old. I never thought in this lifetime I'd get to meet you in person. In my heart, I thought, Chunanjusher, I had hoped to meet you someday. Meeting you now, this is truly wonderful. The strokes of her pen, bold and vivid, had indeed left a mark on me. Epilogue 1. Xiao Shu stretched her arms and let out a massive yawn. The next moment, she heard laughter erupting around her, followed by the voice of her Chinese teacher. Xiao Shu, enjoying your nap? It took her a moment to realize the teacher was talking to her. Her mind, still caught in a dream where she had lived in the Han Dynasty, struggled to reorient itself. Had it been a dream? It had felt so real, like she could still hear Tingzhu begging her not to die. The Chinese teacher didn't seem angry, chuckling lightly before speaking again. I understand. Tingzhu's long memorial essay, eulogy for Xu Ning, can be a bit much. But we still have to focus in class. Xiao Shu quickly apologized, but her mind was reeling. Eulogy. What's that about? Before her nap, the class had been discussing eulogy for the early passing of the young girl, written by the Luo family after Tingzhu's death. In this version of history, Luo Tingzhu, a talented poet, had tragically died at the age of 9 during a bandit raid. Her grieving family compiled her poems into a book and sent a copy to her maternal family in Jiangnan. 10 years later, Su Jia, visiting the outskirts of the city with his father, happened upon this book by chance. Deeply moved, he became obsessed with meeting the poet, only to learn that she had passed away. Stricken with grief, he fell ill, but through this connection, he became a close friend of Luo Songnian, Tingzhu's protective older brother. Though the poetry collection was eventually lost to time, their legendary friendship endured. The teacher, a self-proclaimed fan of Su Jia, grew passionate as he discussed eulogy for the early passing of the young girl. He even launched into stories about the Han Dynasty, regaling the class with tales of its celebrated poets and eccentric geniuses. Even the history teacher loved discussing the Han Dynasty, often referring to it as the most romantic era. Its vast array of renowned writers and extraordinary characters had cemented its place in history. For example, the most famous imperial same-sex couple, or Su Jia's decades-long efforts to preserve his father's political position. Whenever his father angered the emperor with his blunt advice, Su Jia would write tearful pleas on his behalf, saving him from disgrace. The teacher's enthusiasm was infectious, and the students listened intently. Xiao Shu, now fully awake, whispered to her desk mate. Why is the teacher criticizing Su Jia's close friend now? Her desk mate looked at her like she was crazy. What close friend? Su Jia chased after Luo Tingzhu for years before finally marrying her. Luo Songnian hated him for it, writing 62 poems to curse his brother-in-law. Only after Su Jia saved his career with one of those essays did he stop openly cursing him and started doing it subtly. Xiao Shu was stunned. Ha! Didn't Luo Tingzhu die at 9? Her desk mate stared at her incredulously. Are you out of your mind? She lived to 99. Epilogue 2. 10 years after Xu Ning's death, I wept bitterly as I painstakingly completed the 1,000-character memorial essay eulogy for Xu Ning. My heart heavy with grief, I eventually fell into an exhausted sleep. That night, for the first time, I dreamed of Xu Ning. She was wearing strange clothes but still looked as young as the day she passed. Choking on my tears, I asked, Shu Ning, I've missed you so much. Are you doing well? Shu Ning's voice trembled as she replied, Miss, I'm doing okay. But if you'd write a little less, I'd be doing even better. I'm begging you, please stop writing. Or at least, hide that eulogy for Shu Ning where no one can see it. Burn it for me instead, so I can enjoy it privately. Let it be our little secret. She suddenly clutched her head and wailed. Damn it. I can't memorize it all, it's impossible. There's too much to memorize. The end.